Hi everyone, welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. It is February 13th, 2018. Just 10 days ago, the Trump administration issued the U.S. nuclear policy review that's caused a bit of a storm here in Tokyo. Michael, there's a little bit of controversy flowing here, isn't there?
A lot of controversy that's going on in terms of what is Japan's position. Japan is the only country that has ever suffered a nuclear attack and has, as a part of its fundamental principles, both an aversion to not only nuclear weapons, but nuclear power. Now, thanks to the Fukushima disaster, it's more a hatred than an aversion, and has, as a part of its foreign policy, something called the three non-nuclear principles, that Japan will not have nuclear weapons, it will not allow the transit of them through its waters and territories, that there is an anti-nuclear stance that is built into the Japanese governmental format. Now, upon the release of the nuclear posture review, which
is a bit of saber rattling, isn't it?
Which is a huge amount of saber rattling on the part of the Trump administration. Which
Maybe necessary. Probably necessary.
Possibly in terms of setting up some kind of propaganda point that can be later talked back down in regards to both developments that are going on in Russia in terms of intermediate range missiles, but more importantly, having to do with North Korea.
Or a bloody nose without actually delivering a bloody nose.
Well, we won't even try to get into that because the non-appointment of Victor Cha is a complete disaster for U.S. policy, but we're not a U.S. policy shop as far as we know. But in terms of the nuclear issue, the Abe government, through its foreign minister, Kono Taro, who himself is an anti-nuclear activist.
Yes.
Kono Taro.
He has caught an awful lot of heat for that, hasn't he?
He personally is an anti-nuclear activist, an anti-nuclear power activist, to be sure. But to have him standing there and saying that the new nuclear posture review, which expands the United States' potential deployment and use of nuclear weapons in warfare.
It enhances the likelihood that it could happen.
The likelihood that could be used in some kind of military way, that Japan would not only value it, but highly value it, and have him deliver that message has been just absolutely had some people in absolute, both in tears and absolutely shaking in rage.
Right. Well, we see this with him every once in a while where he steps out of his official role and he makes a personal comment. For example, he did this a couple of weeks ago about renewable energy.
And where he went against the government line, but now he's back in the government line.
And his statement last week about the NPR was, rah-rah. I think that was from the cabinet position, which he needs to say, and he needs to say that clearly.
There's also the question of this, there's a particular, all of this seems to rotate around a single weapon system that the United States doesn't even have anymore, which are cruise missiles launched from U.S. nuclear submarines that have nuclear warheads on them. These were removed from the arsenal under the elder Bush administration and completely dismantled under the Obama administration because it was considered that these were simply not militarily usable devices. That second act of simply disposing of them was strongly fought by Japan's foreign policy bureaucracy without telling the political classes. And indeed, one of the huge embarrassments for the incoming Democratic Party when it came into power in 2009 was having to somehow assert its authority. Okada Katsuo was the new foreign ministry, over the bureaucrats, and finding out that they had argued that bureaucrats entirely gone rogue, had gone to Washington and had argued against the Obama administration's wish to get rid of these weapons. And this is Japan.
Didn't get that memo yet?
This is Japan arguing for the keeping of nuclear weapons when the official line of the entire government is that disarmament is the best thing for everybody. And then the Democratic Party had to walk back what had been done in public. And
pretty embarrassing.
And it's pretty embarrassing. Now, the language of the Japanese government hones in again upon this weapons system. Now, they say that it enhances extended deterrence, which is deterrence not that the United States employs for its own defense, but in terms of its allies. Somehow this weapon system, because it can be popped up out of the ocean and fired at, there's only one country that it matters, North Korea, though some people say it's necessary to counter Russian developments. This is basically an idea that you can use nuclear weapons tactically in what is not a full-out ballistic missile exchange between superpowers, but to deliver that bloody nose, that idea of a
limited
a strike that shocks the other country into stopping the cycle of escalation.
Right.
Anyone who tries to work out the mathematics or the logic of this kind of exchange never is able to prove that you can use a nuclear weapon and the other side won't respond. It's just maddening to think about that. But there are Americans who have argued that indeed the United States must have this because the Russians have this capability, that they can start a limited nuclear war and then stop and dare the United States to destroy life on this planet.
Right.
Any way you argue this, it seems mad, and mutually assured destruction is what's left over. Nevertheless, the Japanese government, particularly the elements of the Japanese bureaucracy, are absolutely wedded to this thing.
Sure.
And no one to this day knows why. And it's never been examined in the Diet. And now that this has happened, that the government has fully gone in on the nuclear posture review, repudiating what was done under the Democratic Party when it was in power, we're going to see something going on in the Diet. There are going to be questions at some point, and it'll be up to the various committee heads, especially in terms of foreign policy, to see how much Kono Tower is going to be dragged over the coals for this.
Well, the nuclear policy review was issued 10 days ago, 7 days before the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, started in South Korea, with the heads of state, not quite the heads of state of the United States. Vice President Pence went there with Prime Minister Abe and President Moon.
That's right. And also, as we saw, the sister of Kim Jong-un. So there were various persons of various levels there. And Mike Pence put on a show of petulant, strong-jawed Americanism. And that didn't play well internationally. But Mr. Abe, when the Korean teams came out in a joint formation, the fact that Mike Pence stayed seated, despite the fact it was the Korean team, the home team, the country that was hosting it, and the president of that country was right next to him standing up, he sat down. And that got a lot of bad press. But Mr. Abe was down too. And stayed down. Of course, Mr. Abe has his own set of excuses why he can do that, part of which is the very prominent blue dot that is the island of Takeshima/Dokdo, which South Korea controls. It was on the
flag.
On the flag, which, given the scale, it should not have been visible.
Right.
The rest of it's a really tiny piece of dirt, in the middle of the ocean.
But you could see it from far away.
And that this is all
in your nose.
Yeah, this is all a part of the in-your-face approach of the South Korean government that the North Korean government had, where they agree completely. Let's stick it to the Japanese on this one, because Japan also claims that island as its own territory. That he can sit down now and not be criticized internationally. Also, everybody pays attention to the United States. The meetings, however, and the atmosphere have
the atmospherics
are at least for this week and maybe next week, there are going to be all kinds of shiftings of various positions. Fundamentally, it's not going to change much. In that same week, this last week, we also had what the arms control wonks call Juche Fest, which is when North Korea has its parade of latest missiles.
What great timing.
Perfect. For just as the Olympics are starting, also put on this parade of missiles and send your sister. Kim Jong-un's having a good week. Okay, fine. But next week's going to be different. The North Korean cheerleaders have gone home. It's going to be a different situation, and a more normal politics will probably reassert itself. Nevertheless, the United States' position in the region is really ambiguous, and because even though there's a great deal of masculine chest thumping and all that, the reality is that China is the more important place, and that's where the nuclear posture review comes into it. It's Mr. Trump's saying to the rest of Asia, not just to Kim Jong-un, as he said in his tweet, "I've got a big button on my desk,
right,
and mine's bigger than yours." And it's going to be even bigger because under my nuclear posture review, we're going to have modernization. We're going to have new weapons systems that are going to be put in. That's the question is, of course, what in terms of the geopolitics of the region, what of anything that the Trump administration now does is real,
right,
and what is simply a blustery
stance,
a fashion, something that once it's said, we can forget.
Right.
That's the chess grandmaster Kasparov, who now tweets a lot in English, said, in terms of the dictator, and he was speaking both about Putin and about Trump. He says it's not important what they said in the past. What's important is the next thing that they say. And indeed, that's basically what this nuclear posture review was. Here I am, I'm saying something, but a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, it will be in the past, and very likely even it'll be forgotten. But here in Japan, in terms of Japan's support of that, the politics is still a little bit different, and indeed, I think the government's going to be held to account.
Well, Vice President Pence just said yesterday that if they want to talk, sure, we can talk.
Yeah.
So he's changed. This is a really fluid environment, and there's even from talk about the bloody nose to the NPR, and then sitting at on the same stand with watching the opening of the Olympics. A lot of dynamics going on here, and a lot of fluidity.
And indeed, just like the Olympics, a lot of it's for show.
What's going on in North Korea captures our attention. We'll continue to watch it. You should too. Please stay tuned.